My husband called me a living wallet on the phone, not knowing I was listening. Today, I thought nothing could hurt me anymore. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd tell. And if you, for a single second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me keep unburdening myself. It's 3 o'clock on a gray October Tuesday in Austin, Texas, and I'm here, sitting in the kitchen of my house in Westlake Hills, staring at the cups of coffee I prepared for my husband and me. He's in his office, talking on the phone with someone, and I just heard something that has shattered me into pieces I didn't even know existed. My name is Carolyn Hayes. I'm 63 years old, and for the last 8 years, I believed that Edward Miller was my second chance at love. I remarried after being widowed, thinking I had found a man who would see me as more than just a convenience. How wrong I was. Just an hour ago, I got back from the bank. I had gone to check on some investments, the ones I've built over 30 years working as a CPA at Mr. Robert Martinez's firm, saving dollar by dollar until I amassed the $2.8 million I have today. Money I earned with my own two hands, with my own sacrifices, with the nights I stayed up doing tax returns until 3 in the morning. As I walked into the house, I heard Edward's voice from his study. He was talking to someone on the phone, and his tone, there was something different about it. It was the voice he used when he thought no one was listening, when he thought he was completely alone. I stopped in the hallway, next to the pot of geraniums I tend to every day, and, unintentionally, I listened. Seriously, you're still with that old lady, Unc? It was the voice of Tyler, his 25-year-old nephew, that irresponsible kid who's always coming around to borrow money. Edward's response sliced through me like a rusty knife. Of course I'm still with her. What, you think I'm an idiot? That woman isn't my wife. She's my living wallet. As long as she's got those millions in the bank, I'm staying put. Why dump her when I haven't emptied the whole account yet? I felt my legs turn to jelly. I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. My heart started pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. And she doesn't suspect a thing? Tyler asked, laughing as if it were the funniest joke in the world. What's she going to suspect? That poor, naive woman thinks I'm the love of her life. She makes my favorite meals, buys me expensive clothes, lets me use her Mercedes. If only she knew I'm just with her for her millions. She's dumber than I thought when I met her at that adult dance class. Their laughter echoed through the house. My house. The house that I bought with my money, that I decorated with my furniture, where I've cooked for this man for 8 years believing he loved me. I brought my trembling hands to my mouth to keep from screaming, to keep from vomiting right there, to keep from running out and confronting him right then and there, even though every fiber of my being was screaming at me to do it. You know the best part, Tyler, Edward continued, and I could tell from his voice that he was smiling. That smile I loved so much, the one I believed was sincere when he gave it to me each morning. She thinks she needs me, that she'd die of loneliness without me. She calls me honey, and my love makes me feel like a king, and I'm just waiting for the perfect moment to take off with everything I can. You're a genius, Unc. A rich, lonely old lady. The perfect business. Business. I had become a business. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, but the air wouldn't reach my lungs. I remembered this morning, when I made him his eggs Benedict with extra hollandaise, just how he likes them. When I ironed his favorite blue shirt, when I kissed his forehead before leaving for the bank and told him, I love you, honey. All of that, while he saw me as a bank account with legs. For these 8 years, since we met at those salsa classes at the community dance studio, I have paid for everything, absolutely everything. His suits, his medications, the dinners at expensive restaurants, the trips to Key West and the Caribbean that he said he needed to de-stress. I even bought him the BMW he drives because his old car was getting too old, and a man of his status needed a respectable vehicle. He always had a perfect excuse. His pension wasn't enough. His kids didn't support him financially. His ex-wife had taken everything in the divorce. And I, like a complete fool, I believed it all. I opened my wallet, my bank account, my heart, my bed, my entire life to him. So when are you going to make the final move? Tyler asked. Soon. Very soon. I've almost got her to put me as the beneficiary on her life insurance and as co-owner of this house. Once I have that, goodbye, Carolyn. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. More laughter. More mockery. More daggers to my dignity. I walked like a zombie to my bedroom, my eyes filled with tears I couldn't shed, my chest filled with a rage I had never felt before. I sat on the bed where we've slept together for 8 years, where he told me I was the most beautiful woman in the world, where he promised we would grow old together. All lies, all theater, all a perfectly calculated performance to steal my years, my money, my love, my trust. That night, when it was time for dinner, I acted as if nothing had happened. I served him his favorite pot roast, warmed the dinner rolls just how he likes, and placed the napkin on his lap. He smiled at me and said, "Thanks, my love. You're the best wife in the world." And I smiled back, though inside I was dying. But that night, as he snored beside me after eating the meal I had cooked, something changed in me. Something hardened, turned cold, transformed into something I didn't know I could feel. That night, I decided that Edward Miller was going to find out what it feels like to be used, what it feels like to be betrayed, what it feels like when you trust someone, and that person stabs you in the back. That night, staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, I began to plan the sweetest revenge of my life, because if he wanted to play with my money, he was about to find out he'd chosen the wrong woman to scam. The following days were the hardest of my life, not because of the sadness, but because I had to act as if nothing had happened while rage and humiliation ate me alive from the inside. Every morning, I had to wake up next to this man, watch him brush his teeth with the toothbrush I bought him, put on the clothes I paid for, and pretend I was still the foolish, enamored wife he thought I was. But while I was acting, my mind was working, remembering, calculating, and above all, planning. I started to remember things I had ignored before, signs my love-struck heart had refused to see, like that time, 6 months ago, when I went to St. David's Medical Center to be with my dear friend Brenda during her surgery, and I ran into Edward leaving the Four Seasons Hotel with a blonde woman in her 40s. When I asked him about it that night, he said he'd been in a business meeting with a financial consultant and that the meeting had run late. I believed him. Of course I believed him. Because a woman in love believes what she needs to believe to keep living in her bubble of happiness. Or that time I reviewed our joint account statement and saw he had spent $1,500 in one day at the Domain Shopping Center. When I asked, he said he had bought tools for the business he was planning to start, a business he never mentioned again, of course. For these 8 years, I had been the provider of everything, not just the money, but the care, the affection, the home he had never managed to build for himself. When I met him, he was living in a rented apartment in South Congress, with old furniture and a refrigerator that barely worked. He said his ex-wife had taken everything in the divorce, that his 3 children wouldn't speak to him because she had turned them against him, that he was starting from scratch at 55. Such a touching story. Such a perfect performance. I remembered how he ended up moving into my house. First, it was the occasional night, when he said he felt so lonely in his apartment. Then it was full weekends, because being with me was the only thing that gave him peace. Then it was entire weeks, because he was having trouble with his landlord and needed time to find a better place. And finally, without me even realizing how it happened, he was living here permanently. In my house, eating my food, using my utilities, sleeping in my bed. And I, like an idiot, was happy to be taking care of the love of my life. On Tuesday morning, while he was in the shower singing that Johnny Cash song he loves so much, I sat in the kitchen with my coffee and a notebook. I started to do the math. Cold, cruel, but necessary numbers. In 8 years, I had spent approximately $150,000 on Edward. Clothes, food, medicine, trips, his car, repairs to his BMW, gas, insurance, birthday and anniversary gifts, dinners out, concert tickets, that Omega watch I gave him last year because he said, a man of his standing needed a watch that showed his success. $150,000, almost half of my cash savings. And this whole time, he had been laughing at me behind my back, telling his nephew and God knows who else that I was his living wallet, planning how to steal what was left and then disappear from my life as if these 8 years had meant nothing. But what hurt the most wasn't the money. It was remembering all the times I had defended this man to my friends when they, with good intentions, tried to warn me. "Carolyn, that man doesn't work. What does he live on?" my friend Rose had asked after meeting him at my 60th birthday party. "He's looking for a job, Rose. It's tough to find work after 50. In the meantime, I can support him. That's what partners are for, right? To support each other. And what does he bring to the relationship, honey?" my dear friend Brenda had insisted. "Because from what I can see, you pay for everything. You cook, you clean, you work. He brings love, Brenda. He brings companionship. He brings affection. Not everything in life is about money." How naive I had been. How blind. How stupid. On Wednesday night, as we ate the shepherd's pie I had made especially because I know it's his favorite, Edward took my hand across the table and said, "Carolyn, my love, you are the most generous and noble woman I have ever met. I don't know what I would do without you." And I, who already knew the truth, smiled and squeezed his hand. "And I don't know what I would do without you, honey." But inside, a cold, calculating voice whispered to me, "You're about to find out, you bastard." That night, after he fell asleep watching the nightly news, I lay awake thinking about my late husband, Robert. My first husband, the father of my 2 daughters, the man who died of a heart attack 10 years ago, leaving me heartbroken but financially stable thanks to his life insurance and the savings we had built together over 25 years of marriage. Robert was never rich, but he was a hard worker. He was honest. He ran a mechanics shop in East Austin, and every dollar he earned, he brought home. I never had to wonder if he loved me or for my money, because back then, I didn't have any money. What we had, we built together, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. When Robert died, my daughters, Alexandra and Patricia, told me I was too young to be alone forever, that at 55, I could still rebuild my life, find someone to keep me company in my golden years. "Mom, Dad wouldn't have wanted you to be alone," Alexandra had said. "He would have wanted you to be happy." And I listened to them. When the pain of losing Robert became more bearable, I decided to get out of the house, meet new people, give love another chance. That's why I signed up for those dance classes at the community studio. That's why I agreed to go out with Edward when he asked me for coffee after class. That's why I believed I had found my second chance at happiness. But what I found was a predator. A man who saw in me what vultures see in a wounded animal. Easy prey. On Thursday morning, as Edward was eating the scrambled eggs and bacon I'd made for him, his phone buzzed. It was a text message. He read it and smiled. That smile I used to think was for me but now knew was for his secret plans. "Who was that, darling?" I asked in the sweetest voice I could fake. "No one important, honey. Just a friend inviting me out for a few beers on Saturday." A lie. Everything was a lie. Every word that came out of his mouth was just another lie. That afternoon, when he left, supposedly to run some errands at the bank, I took his laptop, which he had left open in the study. I didn't have to look far. There were the emails with a woman named Valerie, a 42-year-old who, judging by the photos they sent each other, could give magazine models a run for their money. "My love, I'm almost done with this," read one of the most recent messages. "In a few more months, I'll have everything we need to start our life together. This old bat is dumber than I thought. The whole pie is almost mine." Her response was even worse. "Oh, Edward, I don't know how you can stand sleeping with that fossil, but for the money he's going to have, I guess the sacrifice is worth it, right?" I read message after message, photo after photo, plan after plan. They had been emailing for 4 months. 4 months in which he told her every detail of how he was manipulating me, every dollar he had gotten out of me, every lie he had told me. There were even pictures of my belongings, my jewelry, my car, the deed to my house that he had photographed when I wasn't home. He had everything cataloged, appraised, priced. I wasn't his wife. I was his investment project. That night, when he came back smelling of cheap perfume and fresh lies, he hugged me from behind while I was washing the dishes. "How was your day, my queen?" "Quiet, my love. I missed you." And it was true. I miss the man I thought he was. I miss the love I thought he felt for me. I miss the life I thought we were building together. But that man had never existed. And that love had never been real. And that life had never been more than a fantasy that I had financed with my own blood. Friday was my 64th birthday. For the first time in 8 years, I woke up with no excitement for the day. Before, every birthday with Edward had been a celebration full of surprises that I, without realizing it, was financing myself. He would organize dinners at expensive restaurants to celebrate the most special woman in the world, but he always managed to have me end up paying the bill because he'd forgotten his wallet or his card was having issues. This year would be different. This year, I knew exactly who the man sleeping next to me was. I got up early and made coffee, like every morning. The aroma filled the kitchen as I heard the familiar sound of the shower in the master bathroom. Edward was getting ready to go out, probably to see his blonde financial consultant, who was so in need of his advisory services. When he came downstairs, he was whistling that Johnny Cash song he likes, dressed in the navy blue shirt I bought him last month at Nordstrom. He looked so handsome, so confident, so sure that he had everything under control. "Happy birthday, my beautiful love," he said, giving me a kiss on the cheek that burned like acid. "Tonight, we're going to celebrate like you deserve." "Thank you, honey," I replied, pouring his coffee into the mug that says, "World's Best Husband," which I gave him last year. The cruel irony. "I have a surprise for you," he continued, taking my hand with that smile that used to melt my heart. "I made a reservation at the Capitol Grill for 8 o'clock. You know, that elegant restaurant downtown you like so much." Of course, I knew which one it was. I also knew that dinner for two there cost around $300. And I also knew who would be paying for it. "Really, my love? That's so thoughtful," I lied, squeezing his hand as if I were still the grateful wife he expected me to be. After he left, supposedly to take care of some important business, I sat in the living room with a cup of chamomile tea and called my daughter Patricia. I needed to hear a voice that truly loved me, even if I couldn't tell her what I was going through. "Happy birthday, Mom. How are you celebrating?" "Edward planned a dinner at the Capitol Grill," I said, trying to sound excited. "Oh, that's so nice. That man really spoils you." "If only you knew, honey. If only you knew." "Yes, I'm very lucky," I lied again. After hanging up, I stared at the family photos on the living room shelf, pictures of my grandchildren, of my daughters at their graduations, of Robert and me on our 20th wedding anniversary. And there, among all those real memories, were photos of me with Edward, in Key West, on a cruise ship, at my company's holiday parties. In all those pictures, I was smiling like a woman in love. He was smiling too, but now I could see what I hadn't seen before. His smiles never reached his eyes. They were the smiles of an actor, a salesman, a professional con artist. That afternoon, I received calls from friends and family wishing me a happy birthday. My dear friend Brenda invited me to lunch the next day at our favorite local brunch spot to have some girl talk. Rose sent me a bouquet of flowers with a card that read, "For the best friend in the world." My grandchildren video called me from San Diego, where my daughter Alexandra lives, and sang a delightfully off-key "Happy Birthday to You." All that sincere love contrasted painfully with the farce I was living in my own home. At 7 o'clock, I got ready for dinner. I put on the black dress I bought 3 months ago, did my makeup the way my granddaughter Sophia taught me the last time she visited, and sprayed on the French perfume I bought for myself on Mother's Day because Edward had forgotten the date. When I looked in the mirror, I saw myself as if for the first time, a 64-year-old woman who had aged well, with gray but well-kept hair, with wrinkles that spoke of a life lived but not of bitterness, a woman who had worked her whole life, who had raised 2 successful daughters, who had saved almost $3 million through her own efforts. Why had I let this man make me feel as if I were worthless without him? Edward arrived on time, as he always did when money was involved. He was elegantly dressed in the gray suit I bought him for his niece's wedding last year. He smelled of the expensive cologne he bought with his savings, but which I had seen charged to my credit card. "You look beautiful, my queen," he said, kissing my hand with soap opera gallantry. During the drive in my Mercedes-Benz, because of course we were taking my car. The BMW I bought him was in the shop. He told me about his plans for the future. He wanted us to buy a beach house in Florida. A smart investment for our golden years, he said. We could use your savings for the down payment, he suggested while driving my car with the confidence of someone who believes he's entitled to everything I own. I'll handle managing the property and the rental income. Of course you will, darling. You'll handle managing my money while I handle working to earn it. At the restaurant, they gave us the table by the window overlooking the inner garden, the one he had specifically requested, because he knew I liked it. The waiter brought the wine list, and as expected, Edward chose a $100 bottle without even looking at the price. Tonight, we celebrate the most important woman in my life, he said, raising his glass in a toast that turned my stomach. During dinner, as he told me anecdotes he had probably rehearsed, I observed him as if he were a specimen in a lab. Every gesture, every expression, every word calculated to keep me pleased and willing to keep paying for his fake love. Carolyn, my love, he said as dessert arrived, there's something I want to ask you. My blood ran cold. From his tone, I knew something big was coming. I've been thinking. We've been together for 8 years now, and I think it's time we made some things official. He pulled some papers from his jacket pocket and placed them on the table, next to the candle illuminating our faces. What's this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. These are the papers to add me as the beneficiary on your life insurance policy and as co-owner of the house. You know, so if anything ever happens to you, I can take care of everything you've worked so hard for. There it was. The final move he had mentioned in his phone call with Tyler. It's just a formality, honey, he continued in a syrupy voice. To protect our assets. Our assets. My assets that he wanted to make his. I don't know, Edward, I said, pretending to consider it. That's a very serious step. Can't we think about it for a while? For the first time all night, I saw a flicker of frustration in his eyes. A microsecond in which the mask slipped, and I could see the predator that had been stalking my money for 8 years. Of course, my love. There's no rush, he said, quickly recovering his charming smile. I just thought that after all this time together. You're right, I interrupted. After all this time together, you'd think we wouldn't need papers to prove our love. He fell silent for a moment, unsure how to interpret my response. When the check arrived, $320 as I'd calculated, Edward put on his usual performance. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry I left my wallet in my other pants. Don't worry, darling, I said, pulling out my credit card. I'll take care of it, just as I had for 8 years, just as he expected me to keep doing for the rest of my life. That night, in bed, while he slept soundly after celebrating my birthday, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. In my hands, I held the papers he had given me, the documents that would officially make me his legal victim. I tore them into small, tiny pieces and threw them in the bathroom trash can. Tomorrow, my revenge would begin. Tomorrow, I would start teaching Edward Miller what it feels like when someone plays you for a fool. On Saturday morning, I woke up with a mental clarity I hadn't had in years. It was as if my brain had spent the whole night reorganizing information, classifying lies, cataloging betrayals, and designing a plan that would bring justice for all these years of humiliation. Edward slept in until 10, as he always did on weekends. While he snored in my bed, using the Egyptian cotton sheets I bought him because he said polyester gave him allergies, I got up quietly and went to the kitchen to make my coffee. But today, I didn't make his. Today, for the first time in 8 years, Edward Miller would have to make his own damn coffee. When he finally came downstairs, it was past 11. He had messy hair and was wearing that Texas Longhorns t-shirt I got him last year for Father's Day, even though he's not the father of my children. Good morning, my love, he said, automatically looking for his coffee mug in its usual spot. Morning, I replied dryly, not looking up from the newspaper. He stood there for a moment, waiting for me to get up and serve him as I did every morning. When he saw I wasn't moving, he walked over to the coffee maker, confused. Is there no coffee? He asked in that tone he used when things didn't go according to his expectations. There's coffee. The coffee maker is right there. Oh, okay. I could feel his bewilderment. This was the first crack in the perfect routine he had established for his comfort. The first sign that something was changing, though he didn't know what yet. While he clumsily made his own coffee, because, of course, he'd never had to do it himself, I pretended to read the Austin American Statesman, but was actually watching him out of the corner of my eye. His movements were uncertain, like someone who had never had to fend for himself in my kitchen. "Everything okay, honey?" he asked, sitting across from me with his poorly made coffee. "You seem a little distant." "I'm fine," I lied, turning the page of the newspaper with more force than necessary. That afternoon, while he was watching football with his friends at a sports bar, paying for the beers with the cash I'd given him for personal expenses, I implemented the first phase of my plan. I called my lawyer, Fernando Gutierrez, a trustworthy man who had handled my legal affairs since Robert's death. I explained that I needed an urgent review of all my legal documents, bank accounts, and properties. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Hayes?" he asked with the concern of someone who had known me for years. "Let's just say I need to make sure everything is protected," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "I understand. Is your husband aware of this review?" "My husband doesn't need to be aware of my financial decisions, Fernando. At least, not yet." On Monday morning, while Edward was still asleep because, according to him, Mondays were for easing into the week, I went to the bank. I met with my account manager, Ms. Martinez, who had been helping me for 5 years. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes. How can we help you today?" "I need to make some changes to my accounts," I said, pulling out a list I had carefully prepared. "I want to remove my husband as an authorized user on all my checking and investment accounts." The woman looked at me with professional surprise. That expression bankers use when something unusual interrupts their routine, but they can't ask personal questions. "Of course, ma'am. Do you need me to explain the implications of these changes?" "That won't be necessary. I know exactly what I'm doing." And it was true. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was taking back control of my money, my assets, my life. I also opened a new savings account at a different bank, Chase, and transferred $500,000 into it. It was my emergency fund, my safety net for what was to come, money that Edward would never know existed. When I got home, he was eating a bowl of cereal. He hadn't even bothered to make himself a proper meal. "Where were you, honey?" he asked with his mouth full. "At the bank, taking care of some things." "Things? What kind of things?" For the first time in 8 years, I didn't give him a full explanation of my activities. "Work stuff," I said simply, heading for the stairs. "Work stuff at the bank?" "Yes." I left him there, with his cereal and his unanswered questions. I could feel his frustration growing like a toxic weed. That night, during dinner, I decided to test how far he was willing to go with his manipulation. "Edward, darling," I said as we ate the enchiladas I'd prepared, "I've been thinking about what you said on Friday, about the legal papers." His eyes lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. "You have? Have you considered it?" "Yes, but I have some questions." "Why is it suddenly so important to do it now? We've been together for 8 years and you've never mentioned it." I could see his brain working, searching for the perfect answer that would convince me without revealing his true intentions. "Well, honey, it's just that you mature, you know? And after seeing you work so hard all these years, building this beautiful nest egg, I think you deserve the peace of mind of knowing it's all protected." "Protected from what?" From life, my love. You never know what might happen. And if something were to happen to you, who would take care of everything you've worked so hard to achieve?" "My daughters," I replied without hesitation. His face fell. For a second, the mask dropped completely, and I saw the genuine annoyance in his eyes. "Yes, but they live far away, honey. Alexandra is in San Diego and Patricia is in Dallas. I'm here with you every day. I know your affairs, your accounts, your investments." A lie. He didn't know my affairs because I had never given him full access to my financial information. What he knew was only what I had shown him, which was far less than he thought. "That's true," I said, pretending to consider it. "But it's also true that important decisions like these aren't made overnight. I need time to think it through." "Of course, my love. Absolutely. Take all the time you need." But from his tone, I knew he was starting to get desperate. He had probably already promised his lover Valerie that he would soon have legal access to my assets. On Wednesday, I received the first strange call. It was from the bank where Edward supposedly had his savings account, an account that, according to him, had very little money because the economy had hit his personal investments hard. Mrs. Hayes, this is Mr. Morales from Wells Fargo. Your husband has requested information about your bank accounts, but we need your authorization to provide him with that data. My blood ran cold. Edward was investigating my finances behind my back. What kind of information did he request? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Balances, statements for the last 6 months, information on investments. He said he needs the data for your annual tax return. A lie. I had always done my own tax return with my trusted accountant. I do not authorize you to provide him with any information, I said firmly. And I would appreciate it if you would inform me if he makes this kind of request again. Of course, ma'am. We apologize for the inconvenience. When I hung up, my hands were trembling with rage. This man had not only been robbing me emotionally for 8 years, but now he was trying to spy on me financially. That night, I confronted Edward directly. The bank called me today, I said as I washed the dinner plates. Oh? What for? To ask if I authorized them to give you information about my bank accounts. He froze completely. I could see his breathing quicken. Oh, well, honey, I thought I could help you with your taxes this year. You know I'm good with numbers. Edward, I've had a CPA for 15 years. You've never done my taxes and I don't need you to. Yes, but I thought, what exactly did you think? I interrupted, turning to look him straight in the eye. I thought that maybe I could. I watched him stammer, search for excuses, invent justifications. And in that moment, I knew it was time to stop playing games. Edward, I said, in a voice I didn't even recognize, don't you ever investigate my financial affairs without my permission again. Is that clear? Yes. Yes, my love. Of course. It was just an idea. I didn't think you'd be upset. But I was no longer listening to his excuses. I was planning my next move, because this war was just beginning. On Thursday morning, I made the most liberating decision of my life. I canceled the supplementary credit card I had put in Edward's name 3 years ago. During all this time, he had spent an average of $2,000 a month on that card, buying everything from expensive clothes to dinners with his friends, including gifts that he claimed were for important clients, but which I suspected ended up in the hands of his lover. I sat in my comfortable living room armchair, the one by the window where the morning light streams in, and dialed the bank's customer service number. After navigating the automated menu I loathe, I finally spoke to a real person. Good morning. My name is Carolyn Hayes. I need to cancel a supplementary credit card. Of course, ma'am. Can you provide me with the card number? I gave her all the necessary information. The process was surprisingly simple. In less than 10 minutes, I had cut one of the financial umbilical cords that kept Edward attached to my money. The card will be canceled within the next 4 hours, the representative informed me. Is there anything else I can help you with? Yes. I also want to change my online banking passwords and request new debit cards be sent to me. Perfect. Any specific reason for these security changes? Precaution, I replied simply. After hanging up, I felt like I had breathed fresh air for the first time in years. It was a strange feeling, a mix of freedom and nervousness. I knew that when Edward discovered these changes, things would get very tense in my house. I didn't have to wait long. Around 2 in the afternoon, while I was peacefully eating my tortilla soup in the kitchen, I heard the engine of my BMW pulling into the garage. Edward had left early, supposedly for a work meeting that I now knew was a date with Valerie. I heard him come in through the side door, but instead of coming to greet me as he always did, he went straight to his study. 5 minutes later, I heard him on the phone, his voice agitated. No, it can't be. It must be a system error. What do you mean, canceled? No, I didn't authorize any cancellation. I stayed very still, spoon halfway to my mouth, savoring every word of his frustration. I need to speak to a supervisor. What does it mean only the primary cardholder can make changes? But I'm the husband. Ah, my dear Edward. Being a husband doesn't give you automatic rights to my money. Something you should have learned a long time ago. A few minutes later, I heard him coming toward the kitchen with heavy steps. When he appeared in the doorway, his face was red and a vein was throbbing in his forehead. "Carolyn," he said, trying to control his voice, "I think there's a problem with my credit card." "Oh? What kind of problem?" "It says it's been canceled, but it must be a mistake because I didn't ask for it to be canceled." I put my spoon down and looked him straight in the eye. "It's not a mistake, Edward. I canceled it this morning." He froze, as if he couldn't process what he had just heard. You canceled it? Why?" "Because it's my money, and I've decided I no longer want you to have access to it." The transformation on his face was immediate and terrifying. The loving husband mask crumbled completely, revealing the furious, calculating man who had been hiding underneath. "What do you mean you don't want me to have access? We're married. What's yours is mine." "No, Edward. What's mine is mine, and what's yours? Well, I've never seen any evidence that you have anything. You can't do this. I have expenses. I have commitments." "Then you'll have to find a way to pay for them with your own money." He approached me with an aggression he had never shown before. For a moment, I thought he might yell or even hit me, but he restrained himself. He probably remembered he needed to maintain at least the appearance of being a good husband. "Carolyn, my love," he said, suddenly switching to his syrupy voice, "I think you're just a little stressed from work. You can't make such important decisions when you're upset. Why don't you call the bank and clear up this misunderstanding?" "There is no misunderstanding, Edward, and I'm not upset. I'm perfectly clear about what I'm doing. But I need that card for my personal expenses." "What personal expenses?" "As far as I know, you don't work. You have no income. You don't pay rent because you live in my house. You don't pay for food because I buy it. You don't pay for gas because you use my car. What exactly do you need my money for?" He was speechless. For the first time in 8 years, Edward Miller didn't have a prepared answer, a ready excuse, a convincing lie. I contribute in other ways," he finally stammered. "Like what?" I give you companionship. I give you love. I help you with—" "What do you help me with, Edward? Because as far as I can see, I cook, I clean, I work, I pay the bills, I maintain this house. What exactly do you help me with?" The truth was like acid on his skin. Every word stripped him further, revealing the reality of his parasitism. "Carolyn, I don't understand why you're suddenly being so cruel to me." "Cruel? You think it's cruel for a woman to manage her own money?" "No, but— Or do you think it's cruel that I no longer want to finance your lifestyle while you contribute absolutely nothing to this relationship?" "I do contribute. I love you. Do you love me? Or do you love my money?" The question hung in the air between us like a ticking time bomb. I could see in his eyes that he knew he was exposed, that the conversation had reached a territory where his lies no longer worked. "How can you ask me that?" he finally said, his voice feigning hurt but sounding more desperate. "Easily, Edward. After 8 years of paying for everything, of financing your life, of being your personal wallet, I have the right to ask if you've ever seen me as anything more than a source of income." His eyes widened when he heard me use the word wallet. For a second, I thought he was going to confess, to admit that he had been using me without truly loving me. But Edward was craftier than I gave him credit for. "Carolyn, my love, I think someone is filling your head with silly ideas. Have you been talking to your friends? Did they say something? Because I swear on my mother's grave that I love you more than life itself." There he was again, manipulating the situation, trying to make me believe the problem was in my head, that my suspicions were the product of outside influences and not his own actions. "No one is filling my head with anything, Edward. I've simply decided that it's time for each of us to be responsible for our own expenses. But what am I going to do? I don't have a job right now. Then you'd better start looking for one." He just stood there, processing the new reality. For the first time in 8 years, he was going to have to fend for himself. He was going to have to find a way to pay for his own luxuries, his own outings, his own gifts for his mistress. "And what if I need money for something urgent?" he asked in a small voice, like a child who has just discovered he can no longer ask Dad for candy money. "Then you'll have to ask someone else." "Who?" "You're my wife. Yes, I'm your wife, not your personal bank." That night, Edward didn't have dinner at home. He claimed he had a work dinner he couldn't cancel. He probably went to cry to Valerie, to tell her his plan was getting complicated, that the golden goose was rebelling. I had dinner alone for the first time in 8 years, and it was the most delicious meal I'd had in a long time. Not because the food was better, but because I had finally started to reclaim my dignity. I slept soundly that night, without having to listen to the snores of a man who saw me as his meal ticket. And when I woke up the next morning, the first thing I thought was, what else can I cancel today? The next few days were like watching a man die of thirst in the desert. Edward tried to maintain his normal routine, but without access to my money, his fabricated world began to fall apart, piece by piece. On Friday morning, I saw him obsessively checking his phone, probably calculating how much money he had in his personal account. Spoiler alert, it wasn't much. For 8 years, he had spent every dollar that came into his hands, always trusting that I would be there to finance his lifestyle. "Carolyn," he said during breakfast, in that voice he used when he was about to ask for something, "I need you to lend me $50, just for this week while I sort some things out." "What things?" Some payments I have to make." "What kind of payments?" He was quiet for a moment, searching for a convincing answer. "For the BMW's insurance." "Edward, I pay the BMW's insurance. I've paid it ever since I bought it for you." "Oh, right. Well, then it's other expenses." "What other expenses?" "Carolyn, why are you interrogating me like a criminal? I just need $50. Is that too much to ask?" "I'm not interrogating you. I just want to know what you need my money for." "It's not your money. We're married. It's our money." "No, Edward, it's my money. Money that I earned working at my job during my work hours. You didn't contribute a single dollar to that account." His face turned beet red. He stood up from the table so forcefully that his chair nearly tipped over. "I can't believe you're treating me like this. After everything we've shared." "What have we shared, Edward? Because according to my calculations, I've shared my money, my house, my food, my bed, my time, and my love. What have you shared with me?" He just stood there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water, because the truth was, he hadn't shared anything. Absolutely nothing. I've shared my love with you," he finally said, his voice desperate. "Your love, or your need for a woman to support you? That's not true. No? Then prove it. Support yourself for 1 month. Pay for your own food, your own gas, your own outings. Show me you can love me without my money." I left him there, with his protests and his excuses, and went to work. For the first time in months, I drove to the office with a genuine smile on my face. That afternoon, when I got back from work, I found Edward talking on the phone in the backyard. His back was to the house, and he was speaking in a low voice, but I could hear fragments of his conversation. "She's been acting so weird lately. I don't know what's wrong with her. She canceled my card. Won't even give me money for basic expenses." I decided to get a little closer, pretending to water the plants by the entrance. "I think someone put ideas in her head. Maybe her friends, or her daughters." A pause. "No, I can't ask my family for money. You know how things are with them since the divorce." Another pause. "Maybe I should look for a job, but at my age, and with no connections, it's very difficult." There was the truth. Edward had no family to support him because he had probably used and defrauded them just like he had me. He had no professional contacts because he hadn't worked seriously in years. And now, at 63, he was realizing he had absolutely nothing without my money. "No, I don't think she suspects anything about us, but she's acting very strange. Yesterday she asked me what I needed the money for. She's never asked me that before." He turned around and saw me there, hose in hand, clearly listening to his conversation. "I have to go," he said quickly, and hung up. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, with the most innocence I could muster. With Tyler, my nephew. I was just telling him you've been a bit stressed lately." "Stressed? Why would you think I'm stressed?" "Well, because of the card and the money. I thought maybe you were having problems at work." "I don't have problems at work, Edward. I don't have problems of any kind. In fact, I've never felt better. Saturday was when it all blew up. Edward had planned to go out with his friends to watch the Texas Longhorns play the Oklahoma Sooners at a sports bar downtown. But when it was time to pay his share of the bill, he realized he didn't have enough cash in his wallet. He called me from the restaurant bathroom, his voice a mix of panic and shame. "Carolyn, honey, I need you to do me an urgent favor." "What kind of favor?" "I need you to transfer me $100 right now. I'm with the guys, and I don't have enough to cover my tab." "And why don't you have enough money?" Because I didn't think it would be this expensive. "Please, honey, they're waiting for me." "Edward, a week ago I told you that from now on, we would each be responsible for our own expenses. That includes your outings with friends." "But I can't look bad in front of them. They'll think I'm a deadbeat." "Well, maybe it's time they found out the truth." "Carolyn, please, I'm begging you. Just this once." "No, Edward. Figure it out." I hung up the phone and turned it off. For the first time in 8 years, Edward Miller was going to have to face the consequences of his parasitism in front of other people. He came home 2 hours later, on foot. Apparently, he had to borrow money from his friends to pay for a cab, because he didn't even have gas in my BMW. "How did you get home?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I walked," he mumbled, not looking me in the eye. "You walked from downtown to Westlake Hills? That's like 6 miles. "Yes. "And why didn't you take the BMW?" "Because it's out of gas." "And why didn't you put gas in it?" Silence. "Why didn't you put gas in it, Edward?" "Because I don't have any money," he finally confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "Ah. And who used to put gas in it?" "You did." "And who paid for that gas?" "You did." "With whose money?" "With your money." "Exactly. With my money. Money that I earned by working while you went out to have fun with your friends." He sank into the living room sofa like a sack of potatoes. For the first time since I'd known him, Edward Miller looked exactly like what he was, a 63-year-old man who had absolutely nothing to his name. "Carolyn," he said that night as we ate dinner in silence, "I think we need to talk." "I'm listening." This can't go on like this. We can't live like enemies." "We're not enemies, Edward. I'm just not your sponsor anymore." But I can't live without money. I need money for basic expenses." "Then get a job. It's very hard to find a job at my age. Other men your age work. Mr. Henderson down the street is 70 and still works at his hardware store. My friend's husband, Raoul, is 65 and drives for Uber. Why can't you work?" Because it's not the same. I'm not used to working." "Is that what you're telling me? That you're not used to working?" "No, it's not that. It's just what, Edward?" "It's just that I thought when you get married, partners support each other." "You're right. Partners do support each other. The key word there is mutually. I've supported you for 8 years. When are you going to support me?" He had no answer for that. Because the truth was, he had never planned to support me. His plan had been to live off me until the day he died. That night, for the first time in 8 years, Edward slept in the guest room. Officially, it was because he was coming down with a cold and didn't want to get me sick. But I knew the truth. He could no longer pretend to be my loving husband, now that he had been exposed as the parasite he truly was. And I slept better than ever. On Sunday morning, I woke up with a feeling I hadn't experienced in 8 years. Absolute freedom. For the first time since Edward had entered my life, I didn't have to worry about making his breakfast, ironing his shirt, or asking him what he wanted to do that day. For the first time in almost a decade, my Sunday belonged completely to me. I got up at 8, made myself a strong coffee just the way I like it, not the way he liked it, and sat on the patio to read the paper in peace. The silence was glorious. There was no snoring, no complaints about the coffee, no constant feeling of walking on eggshells to keep a man happy who saw me as his personal wallet. Edward didn't leave his room until after 11. When he finally appeared in the kitchen, he looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and messy hair. It was as if the reality of his situation was finally hitting him. "Morning," he mumbled, heading straight for the coffee maker. "Good morning," I replied without looking up from the newspaper. He made his coffee in silence and sat at the kitchen table, but I stayed on the patio. The message was clear. We were no longer a team. We no longer shared our mornings. We no longer pretended to be a happy couple. That afternoon, I made a decision I had been putting off for years. I called my daughter, Alexandra. Mom, what a surprise. How are you? I'm doing great, sweetie. Better than I have in a long time. And Edward? How is he? For the first time in 8 years, I didn't lie about my marriage. Honestly, Alexandra, Edward and I are going through some problems. Problems? What kind of problems? Serious ones. I think I made a huge mistake marrying him. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Alexandra had always been diplomatic about Edward, but I knew she had never been completely fond of him. Mom, are you okay? Is he treating you badly? He's not physically mistreating me, but, honey, I don't think he ever really loved me. I think he was only interested in my money. Oh, Mom. Patricia and I always suspected that, but we didn't want to say anything because you seemed so happy. Really? Why did you suspect? Because he never worked, Mom. Because he always had excuses not to contribute financially. Because he seemed way too comfortable living off of you. But you seemed so in love that we thought maybe we were being unfair to him. How blind I had been. My own daughters had seen what I had refused to see. Honey, do you think I'm stupid for letting myself be used like that? Of course not, Mom. You're a good, generous woman who believes in love. There's nothing wrong with that. The only thing wrong is that he took advantage of your kindness. That conversation gave me the strength I needed to make my next decision. On Monday morning, while Edward was still asleep, because why get up early if you have no job and no responsibilities, I got myself especially dressed up. I put on my favorite blue dress, the one that makes me look younger, did my makeup carefully, and spritzed on my good perfume. For the first time in months, I wasn't just going to work. I was starting my new life. During my lunch break, instead of eating at the office like I always did, I went to the Domain. I walked into a boutique I'd always admired but never shopped at because, according to Edward, it was too expensive for a woman my age. I tried on dresses, blouses, shoes. I bought a whole new outfit that made me feel beautiful, elegant, valuable. I paid with my credit card, without having to ask anyone if it was necessary or if it wasn't too expensive. Afterwards, I went to a salon and got a makeover. I asked the stylist to give me a more modern haircut, to put in some highlights to blend in the gray, to do my nails. Any special occasion? The young woman asked as she worked on my hair. Yes, I said, looking at my reflection. I'm celebrating my freedom. When I got home that afternoon, I felt like a new woman. My hair was shiny and stylish. My new clothes fit perfectly. And for the first time in years, I felt attractive and worthy. Edward was in the living room watching TV when I walked in. When he saw me, his jaw dropped. Carolyn, you look very different. Thank you. What's the occasion? I decided to invest in myself. How much did all that cost? Excuse me? The hair, the clothes. How much did you spend? And why would that matter to you? Well, it's just that if there's money for that, maybe I could what, Edward? Maybe you could give me some for my basic expenses. I laughed. I literally laughed in his face. Edward, I just spent $500 on myself for the first time in years. In that same time, you've spent hundreds of thousands of my dollars without ever asking if I was okay with it. And now you're going to question me about $500 I spent on myself. I'm not questioning you. I'm just saying that, no, you have no right to an opinion on how I spend my money. Just like I apparently had no right to an opinion on how you spent mine all these years. That night, I went out alone for the first time in 8 years. I went to the Paramount Theater to see a play I had always wanted to see, but never could, because Edward didn't like the theater. I bought the most expensive ticket, front row center, and enjoyed every minute of the show. During intermission, a very elegant woman sitting next to me said, "Excuse me, but I couldn't help but notice you came alone. How brave. I would never dare." You know what? I replied. It's the first time I've gone anywhere alone in years, and I'm enjoying it much more than I thought I would. Does your husband not share your tastes? My husband and I are redefining our relationship. When I got home, it was past 11. Edward was waiting for me in the living room, pacing like a caged lion. Where were you? I was worried. At the theater. The theater? With who? By myself. You went to the theater alone? Yes? Is there a problem? Well, it's strange for a married woman to be out alone so late. Strange? Or inconvenient for you? Inconvenient? Why would it be inconvenient? Because maybe you're afraid that if I start going out alone, I'll realize I don't need you for anything at all. He fell silent, because we both knew I had hit the nail on the head. Carolyn, I feel like you're pulling away from me. I'm not pulling away, Edward. I'm getting closer to myself. And what's going to happen to me? That's a question you should have asked yourself 8 years ago, before you decided I was your retirement plan. On Tuesday morning, as I was getting ready for work, Edward came into the bathroom where I was putting on my makeup. Carolyn, we need to talk. Seriously. I'm listening. This can't go on. We haven't spoken normally in a week. We're sleeping in separate rooms. You're doing your own thing and I'm doing mine. This isn't a marriage. You're right. It's not a marriage. Because a marriage requires mutual love, mutual respect, and mutual contribution, and the only thing mutual around here has been your benefit. What do you mean by that? I mean that for 8 years, I've been the only one putting anything into this relationship. My money, my home, my time, my love, my care. What have you put in? I've put in my love. Your love? Or your performance? I turned to look him straight in the eye. Tell me the truth, Edward. Did you ever really love me, or did you just love my bank account? I could see in his eyes that the question had hit him like a hammer. For a moment, I thought he was finally going to confess the truth. But Edward was a coward, and cowards never confess willingly. Of course I love you, Carolyn. How can you doubt that? Easily, I said, finishing my lipstick. If you love me, prove it. Get a job, support yourself, and show me that you can love me without depending on my money. And what if I can't find a job? Then I guess we'll find out just how real your love for me is. I left him there, standing in the bathroom, facing the consequences of his decisions for the first time in his life, and I went to work feeling more powerful than I had in years. 3 months after I canceled Edward's credit card, my life had completely transformed. It was as if I had woken up from an 8-year dream, or rather a nightmare, and could finally see my world with absolute clarity. Edward had gotten a job, not out of love for me, but out of sheer necessity for survival. He worked as an insurance salesman in a small office downtown, earning commissions that barely covered his most basic personal expenses. He could no longer afford expensive dinners, costly gifts for his lover, or extravagant outings with his friends. The transformation in his behavior was radical and instructive. Without access to my money, his entire charming personality had vanished. He no longer called me my love or honey in that syrupy voice. He no longer brought me flowers bought with my own money. He no longer planned romantic dinners that I ended up paying for. What was left was a bitter, resentful man who blamed me for forcing him to work at his age. As if supporting himself were a responsibility I had unfairly imposed on him. I don't understand why I have to get up at 6 in the morning at my age, he complained every night. Other men my age are already enjoying their retirement. Other men your age worked their entire lives and saved for their retirement. I would reply with a patience I no longer felt. You decided to live off a woman for 8 years instead of building your own future. That's not true. I worked before I met you. Yes. And what happened to all those savings you supposedly had? Where is your house? Where is your car? Where are your investments? Silence, as always. The final break came on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks ago. Edward had come home from work in a particularly bad mood because he'd had a no-sale day and his supervisor had reprimanded him for his poor performance. "This is your fault," he said as we ate dinner. "If you weren't so selfish with your money, I wouldn't have to put up with the humiliation of this crappy job. My fault? It's my fault that at 63 years old you don't know how to support yourself? It's your fault for getting me used to a certain lifestyle and then ripping it away from me. Edward, that lifestyle was never yours. It was mine. You were just a guest who overstayed his welcome. We're married. What's yours should be mine. And what's yours? Should that be mine too? Because from what I can see, all you have are debts and problems." He shot up from the table so violently that his plate fell to the floor, shattering against the kitchen tiles. "I can't take this anymore. I can't live like this." "Then don't," I said, with a calmness that surprised even me. "No one is forcing you to stay. Are you kicking me out of my own house?" "This isn't your house, Edward. This is my house, bought with my money, decorated to my taste, maintained by my work. You are a guest who has abused my hospitality for 8 years. You can't do this to me. Not after everything we've been through together. Everything we've been through? You mean everything I've paid for so you could live comfortably? That night, Edward packed his things. He didn't have much, really. The clothes I had bought him, some personal effects, and the few possessions he had brought with him when he moved in years ago. "Where are you going to go?" I asked, not out of concern, but out of curiosity. "To Tyler's. My nephew is going to rent me a room." "Ah, the same Tyler who laughed at me when you called me your living wallet." He froze. For the first time in 8 years, Edward Miller was completely speechless. How do you know about that conversation?" "Because I heard you, Edward. I heard the whole conversation where you told your nephew I was your personal ATM, where you both laughed at how stupid I was, where you planned how to bleed me dry." His face went through every color of the rainbow. Red with shame, white with panic, green with nausea. "Carolyn, I was drunk. I wasn't serious." "Not serious? So the life insurance papers you asked me to sign weren't serious either? And the attempts to get me to make you co-owner of my house weren't serious? I love you, Carolyn. Everything else it was stupid. But my love for you is real." "No, Edward. Your love for my money was real. I was just the obstacle you had to endure to get to it." He left that same night. No dramatic farewell, no promises of change, no last-minute pleas. He simply took his bags and left, like the coward he had always been. The first few days after he left were strange. The house felt too quiet, too big, too empty. For 8 years, I had gotten used to the constant noise of another person, his footsteps, his TV, his complaints, his demands. But after a week, I started to enjoy the silence. It was a clean, peaceful silence that was all mine. I rediscovered pleasures I had forgotten, like getting up on Saturdays without having to make breakfast for anyone but myself, like watching TV without having to negotiate which show we were going to watch, like spending my money on things I actually wanted without having to justify it to anyone. I signed up for painting classes at the Contemporary Austin's art school, something I had always wanted to do but never could because Saturday mornings had to be available for whatever Edward wanted to do. I started to travel, short weekend trips at first. Santa Fe, New Orleans, places I had visited with Edward but could now truly enjoy, without worrying about how much I was spending or if he was having a good time. I reconnected with my friends, Rose, Brenda, Linda, women who had been part of my life before Edward, but had gradually drifted away as he began to absorb all my time and attention. "You look different," Brenda told me during one of our lunches at our favorite brunch spot. "You look free." "I feel free," I replied. "For the first time in 8 years, I can breathe. And you don't miss him at all?" "I miss the idea of him. I miss the fantasy of having a partner who truly loves me. But him, the real man, the parasite who lived off me? No. I don't miss him for a second." 2 weeks ago, I ran into Edward at the supermarket. He looked awful. He had lost weight, had deep circles under his eyes, and his clothes he probably bought at a thrift store, looked cheap and ill-fitting. "Carolyn," he said, approaching with that fake smile I knew so well. "How are you?" "Very well, thank you. And you?" "Good, good. Working a lot. You know how it is." A lie. He looked terrible. "I'm so glad to hear that," I said sincerely. "It's good that you're finally learning to stand on your own 2 feet. Carolyn, do you think we could maybe talk sometime? You know, as friends." "Why would we want to do that, Edward?" To clear the air, for some closure, to see if you can convince me to give you a second chance." He fell silent, because we both knew I'd hit the nail on the head. "Edward, you and I have nothing to clear up. You wanted my money, I gave you access to it for 8 years, and when I realized that's all you wanted, I took it away. End of story. It wasn't just about the money, Carolyn. I do care about you. Maybe you do, but not enough to work for yourself, not enough to be honest with me, not enough to treat me as anything more than a source of income." I left him there between the supermarket aisles, with his empty cart and his worn-out excuses. Yesterday was my 65th birthday. For the first time in almost a decade, I celebrated it exactly how I wanted to. I hosted a dinner at my house with my daughters, my grandchildren, my true friends, people who love me for who I am, not for what I have. Patricia flew in from Dallas just to be with me. Alexandra came from San Diego with my 3 grandchildren. We cooked together, laughed together, and remembered stories from when they were little and life was simpler. "Mom," Alexandra said to me as we washed the dishes after dinner, "I want you to know that Dad would be so proud of you." "Proud of what, honey?" "That you had the courage to stand up for yourself. That you didn't let that man keep using you. Dad always said you were the strongest woman he knew. But I think you'd forgotten that yourself." She was right. I had forgotten my own strength. I had forgotten my own worth. I had allowed a parasite to convince me that I was lucky to have him, when the reality was exactly the opposite. Today, as I write these lines on my patio, sipping my morning coffee from the mug that says "World's Best Mom," a gift from my grandkids, I can see my life with crystal clarity. I am a 65-year-old woman with nearly $3 million in the bank, a paid-off house, 2 successful daughters, 3 beautiful grandchildren, and a whole life ahead of me, a life that now belongs completely to me. Have you ever let someone make you feel like you had to buy their love? Have you lived through or known someone who has gone through something similar? If my story touched your heart, I ask you to let me know in the comments. And if you think someone else needs to hear this message, please give it a like and subscribe so this story can reach those who truly need it. Because no one, absolutely no one, should ever have to pay to be loved.